warning, there will be spoilers in this video, so if you don't want me to spoil them for you, go ahead and click away. Hi guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Tally if you are new to this channel. Today I will be talking about It by Stephen King. So, the book It was published in the year 1986 by Stephen King, and the book takes place in Derry, Maine, where friends Bill, Ben, Beverly, Richie, Mike, and Eddie fight for their lives after Bill's brother Georgie is murdered by an evil creature. Stephen King goes back and forth from the past to the present. So he starts with the year 1957, and that is the year where Georgie is murdered. Only 6 years old, and he was taken by an evil clown who terrorizes the children of Derry. The evil thing is portrayed as Pennywise the Dancing Clown, which is introduced in chapter 1, where Stephen King introduces the first murder. Pennywise comes back every 27 years. Chapter 1, it is called After the Flood, and the first chapter occurs in the year 1957, and this is where Stephen King includes a lot of detail of Georgie's murder. Basic summary of why this occurred. Why did Georgie's murder occur? Georgie asked Bill is his older brother, so he was sick in bed, Bill if he could make him a boat made out of newspaper, and Bill made it. He goes outside, had to play with the boat. Since it was like really wet outside and it had been raining for the last couple of days, he chases it down the drain, but the boat is way faster than Georgie, and the boat falls into a sewer, and that's where he meets Pennywise the Dancing Clown. And Pennywise tells Georgie that he was apparently blown away by the storm, and he proceeds to ask Georgie if he wanted his boat. Of course Georgie wants it, because if he doesn't get it back, then his older brother Bill will be really upset. And Pennywise offers him a balloon, and balloons play a huge role in this book. Then Georgie reaches down for his boat. Pennywise bites off his arm. Georgie sees his face changing into something horrorizing, and that's when Dave Gardner, the one that found his body, is the first one to come to the scene, but it was already too late because Georgie was already dead. That's basically the first chapter, where Stephen King introduces the story with the first murder of Georgie by Pennywise the Dancing Clown, and those are the first characters that he introduces, Bill and Georgie. Hey guys, it is the next 2 days. I wasn't able to film this video because obviously I didn't have the energy to do so because I've been sick for the past 2 days. So Stephen King actually divides this book into 5 different parts, where he includes 2 time periods. This book is told in the third person omniscient narrator. And if you don't know what an omniscient narrator is, it is the narrator who knows the thoughts and feelings of each character in the story. So Stephen King wanted to combine the stories of children and the adults they later became. So this is the reason why he uses 2 different time periods to tell each of their stories as children and as adults. Instead of talking to you guys about the whole book, I decided to only talk about the year 1985 time period. I think I wanted to talk about this year because that's what's going to be stated in It Chapter 2 this upcoming September, and a lot of people haven't read the book and really don't understand it. So I'm going to be talking about the year 1985, where the losers are adults. Mike Hanlon does the 6 phone calls to the other losers. You don't know why Mike calls them. They made a promise when they were children. If you already saw It Chapter 1, they made a promise at the end, telling each other if it came back, they would come back to Derry and try to fight it again. So I wanted to state some themes throughout the book. There's power of memory, childhood trauma, overcoming evil through trust and sacrifice. So a lot of us are wondering, why is it unnoticed by adults? Well, the reason why: it's a mysterious evil being of an unknown dimension. It's outside of the regions of space. It came to the planet Earth to feed. Its favorite disguise was that of a circus clown, also known as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. Since a lot of little kids are scared of clowns, this is what it transforms into. it morphs into any other being based on its target's fears or nightmares. So we're gonna skip to the first interlude. So before the first interlude, Stephen King puts Mike's phone calls, but before I skip into that, I wanted to skip to the first interlude that Stephen King uses the first narrator, that is Mike Hanlon. Mike Hanlon is keeping a book where he's keeping all the history of Derry, all the murders that have been happening in Derry 27 years later. Mike Hanlon is the only one who stayed behind in Derry while the rest of the losers moved to different states. He is the librarian of Derry. In this chapter, the turtle is mentioned, Adrian Milan is mentioned again, and it also mentions how he felt about making the phone calls. He didn't make the phone calls right away because he wanted to make sure that it had came back and it wasn't just a coincidence. He knew making those phone calls would kill some of them. At first, he's the only one who hears the voice of the turtle. He's the only one who remembers every detail that happened back in that year where Pennywise terrorized them, and because he stayed back in Derry. It has been there since the beginning of time. That's why he lives in the sewers and the drains. It also states in the book that Mike says that he thinks what was here before is still there. The thing that was here the years 1957 through 1958, the years 1929 and 1930, the years 1904 and 1905, 1906, 1867, and the year 1877. It has been there since the beginning of time. So now we come to the exciting part. We want to know the characters, what happened to them. This is the part where they're grown-ups. Mike finally decides to call the losers, the year 1985, and the first person he calls is Stanley. Stanley, of course, seems like the weakest one of the group. Now he is married to Patricia. They live in Atlanta in a suburb. They don't have any kids, which is this is something really important. It relates to all of the losers. Some of them have childs, and they think it has to do something with their childhood because of it. In this chapter, the turtle is mentioned again. It is mentioned throughout the book. Stanley begins to have dreams in the night about something that should be over but isn't. So he already had a feeling that it was already back. And I think this has to do with the power of memory, one of the themes of it. None of them remember exactly what happened that year. The only one who remembers, as I already mentioned, I think, is Mike. He's the only one who remembers because he stayed in Derry. Okay, so when Mike calls Stanley first, Stanley, of course, doesn't take it that well. Spoiler alert! Stanley tells his wife that he's going upstairs to take a bath. His wife finds it really weird. Minutes pass and she's... A couple minutes pass and she decides to go upstairs and check up on him. She tries to unlock the door, but it's locked, and then she knocks, no one answers, and she remembers she has a spare key. She goes and gets it, and spoiler alert, Stanley is dead. Stanley is dead. He is dead. He's dead. He had cut his wrists, and he had dipped his right finger on his blood and written it above the tub. The second person that Mike calls, it's Richie. Richie is the one with the glasses, the goofy one, the one with different voices. He is now a disc jockey in California. He as well doesn't remember anything that happened that time, but he starts remembering as soon as Mike calls him. He begins to think about Georgie's death, the darkness under Derry, the stink of it. Richie books a flight to Maine. He calls his program director, which doesn't take it that well. He gets really upset and he hangs up on Richie. So Ben, he is an architect, owns a company called Worthwhile Company, which is worth a lot. He went to college in California. He had moved from Derry to Nebraska with his mom. He has 3 buildings in New York City. Ben receives Mike's phone call. He also gets upset and he starts remembering all his childhood. He hadn't thought about his childhood in a long time, so he goes to the bar that he always goes on Fridays. The people there, the owners, they already know who Ben is and how rich he is, and they notice something weird about him. He doesn't order the same drink that he always orders. So Eddie is married to Myra. Now Eddie's the one that has asthma. His mom was the bossy, overprotective mom, and she was also overweight. Now, he is married to Myra. Myra is like a twin of his mom, and she is also overweight. Eddie drives rich people around. He owns a limo company. He was going to drive Al Pacino, but now he's not because he received Mike's phone call and he makes his wife drive him since she wants an autograph. It fits perfect for her. He's the only one that doesn't tell his wife where he's going, why he's going, packs all his medicine. Beverly is the girl of the Losers Club. She is now an assistant designer at Delia Fashions. She is married to Tom. Had met at a Chicago bar. Apparently Tom hates when Beverly smokes a lot, so he made her stop. One day when they were walking out of a movie, Tom sees Beverly smoke and he hits her across the cheek 2 times. He makes her say sorry to him. When Beverly receives the phone call, she starts smoking again and she forgets that Tom didn't like it. So Tom gets really upset and angry and he grabs a belt, whips her across her left forearm. Beverly this time, she fights back. She wants to go to Derry because it's important. Bill is the one who stutters, the older brother of Georgie. He's married to Audra. Audra is a famous actress and he is a writer, so he's been writing throughout his whole adult life. He receives a phone call. He tells his wife that he has been thinking about home a lot lately, and then he mentions his little brother Georgie again. She didn't know that Georgie was murdered. He starts telling her everything about Derry and why he needs to go. Later on, Audra decides to follow him. After receiving, he mentions all of their adult lives. In the book, part 3, it's called Grownups. This is where Mike arranges a reunion for the remaining losers. He arranges the reunion at a restaurant called Jade of Orient. He tells Bill that Stanley is dead. Bill doesn't take it that well. His stuttering comes back and they meet at the restaurant. They talk about their lives, what has been going on. They mention how no one has kids, and then Ben starts telling his story about how he got skinny and how he went on a diet, and he tells them about how he moved to Nebraska with his mom. He tells them his story about his coach and how he was bullied in school. Basically, his coach was disgusted of Ben, and Ben was like, you know what? I'm going to show you that I can outrun everyone in the track team and I'm going to get skinny. And he did it. He did it, ladies and gentlemen. He was able to lose weight and he outran everyone in the track team. And Mike starts telling everyone about the murders. He mentions Adrian Milan, which is the first murder that occurred in Derry. All of them still don't remember everything. Mike tells them that everything will eventually come back to them. Before they plan to separate and go their own way, so they can search Derry and see if they can find anything, they get fortune cookies. And this scene is on the first original It. I will insert a video up here. Instead of biting into them, obviously I don't think I bite into fortune cookies. The usual way to do it is like braid them, but Bill finds it so weird that no one bit into it. Everyone cracked them. Then he stops to think that maybe they had done that because part of them still remember everything. Found the most horrifying realization that it had touched one of them. It's still upon them. Each fortune cookie, something splattered out of it. So for Beverly's, blood spurted out of her fortune cookie. For Eddie, a huge cricket came out. She's had an eyeball. Ben's had 2 teeth inside. Bill did not open his because he's the one that thinking about the fortune cookies. But he tells all of them to act natural because if they act horrified, no one's gonna see what is coming out of the fortune cookies. They're the only ones who are able to see what is inside of them. The main reason why they're the only adults that are able to see them is because they killed it when they were a child and it wants revenge from them. When they all separate, they go to different direction and goes to the place where he most finds happiness, where he loves it, and he goes to the library. He spent a lot of time in the library when he was a child. He decides to check out a library card, but he already had one from his childhood. All of a sudden he hears voices telling him that he's the one that murdered the kids that were being murdered in Derry. Eddie went down to the Barrens. He starts hearing voices and he sees the leper who he is scared of. He also sees other kids that were murdered. Beverly goes back to her childhood home. I already mentioned this in my other video. Instead of finding her father, she finds an old lady who is a manifestation of it, Pennywise. Richard Toaster, he sees the Paul Bunyan statue come to life and then turn into Pennywise the clown. And on his other hand, he had a bunch of balloons, as we see on the trailer for the new It Chapter 2. Bill is the only one who does not see Pennywise, but he does see ghosts. He walks to the drain where Georgie was murdered, and he peeks down to see if anything would come out. He is awaiting Georgie's ghosts, but instead he finds a shadow behind him, and it's of a little boy on a skateboard eating a popsicle. And then Bill asks him if he has heard any voices coming down from the drain. The little boy at first doesn't want to tell him because his dad told him not to talk to strangers, but then Bill convinces him to tell him, and then the little boy says yes, he has heard voices, but he thinks that the killings of the children are from sharks. And Bill goes to the nearest store where he buys a bike, and it turns out to be his old bike from his childhood called Silver. He takes the bike to Mike's house, and then they fix the tire, which was flat. Another character, Henry Bowers, he is the crazy one, the bully. He begins to hear voices the same day that Mike makes the phone calls, and obviously the voices are Pennywise. He's in a facility for the criminally insane. He's convicted of killing his father in the late of fall 1958. Pennywise is then able to transform into Victor, which Victor is one of Henry's best friends when they were children. He was also murdered by Pennywise. He tells Henry that he has to kill the losers. He helps Henry escape from the facility by killing some of his inmates. Mike tells the losers that they have to meet at the library at 7 p.m. Once they meet, they go through each other's story. They talk about the smoke hole, they talk about the rock fight, and everything that happened to them as childs. When this is occurring, Stephen King includes it in a different chapter so we as readers can understand what exactly is going on. And all of them leave. Obviously Mike tells them that they need to rest. Mike stays in the library for a little while, but then Henry Bowers goes to the library where Mike was at. He arrived to kill Mike from orders of Pennywise. Henry stabs Mike in the leg, and then Mike stabs Henry in the stomach. Henry leaves because he thinks that he had killed Mike, but Mike was able to get the phone and call the hospital. Then Henry gets picked up by a taxi, and in the taxi, Belch Huggins, who was murdered as well back in that year, he's driving the taxi. He drops Henry off at the hotel the losers were staying. Tom arrives at Derry later on, and then he as well starts hearing voices. Of course, it's Pennywise. He sees a balloon with an arrow pointing to the door, leading him out onto the hall, and then he tells Tom to follow the bouncing ball, and that leads him to Audra, Bill's wife, and then Pennywise takes Audra to the sewer. When Henry arrives to the hotel, he starts from the top to bottom. He finds Eddie and he tries to stab him, but Eddie reacts super fast and he throws a glass bottle at Henry, puncturing his right eye. He ends up dead on the floor. Spoiler! Henry dies. Eddie calls Bill. Bill is downstairs with Beverly. Spoiler alert! Beverly and Bill, they do sleep together. He cheats on Audra. When Eddie, Bill, Ben, and Beverly all meet again in Eddie's room and they see Henry's body, Beverly wants to go to the cops, but obviously the cops are not going to believe them, so they just leave him there. And then they decide to go and kill Pennywise, and they leave in Eddie's limo. When they arrive to the sewers, Stephen King gives us a flashback of when they went down the sewers when they were children, and now as adults. Now, 27 years later, they're going down the sewer all over again on their way to kill it forever. But this time, Mike and Stanley are missing. Of course, Mike is in the hospital. He was almost murdered, but Bill feels something wrong, and then he tells everyone to hold hands, and they send power to Mike so he can kill that person that was almost going to kill Mike. Does that make sense? Cool. While they were going through the tunnel, Derry was going through so much heavy rain, and it started to flood. A lot of people died in Derry that year when they were on their way to kill it. Inside, they see its webbing. A spider from beyond time and space. It was imprisoned into its final shape, just the spider. They start hearing telepathic sound, and its shadow was a squat egg. And then Bill realizes that the spider is actually female. So it was pregnant. The spider actually takes the children to eternity. They get lost there forever, condemned to wander in the black. So, the ritual of chud. This is when they were children. It occurred for the first time. And they were about to kill it. They do see the turtle. When its voice begins to fade, one he hears was of an alien speaking syllables, which is the voice of the deadlights. It wanted Bill to wait for the deadlight so he could live inside of it forever by breaking their mental communication. The spider, it, and it, which they call the deadlights, were linked. Whoever lived in the dark might be impossible to harm. In Derry, it was physical, so it could be easy to kill. Bill had to bite into its tongue, but not with his teeth in his mind. And the turtle tells Bill to scream. He thrusts his fists against the post and still insists he sees the ghosts. I think I read this on a YouTube video that he says this because he used to say it with stuttering. When he says it without stuttering, it can see that Bill isn't scared anymore. So when he says it and he screams it at him, it feels a huge pain, and he sees that Bill is no longer scared. He gets power. When they were children, Bill first battled it with the ritual of chud with advice from the turtle called Marudo. Marudo made the universe. The ritual of chud began for the second time. Now, adult Bill sees the spider again. The spider tells him that the turtle has died. He choked to death on a galaxy. Bill tries to reach for the tongue again of its mind, but he fails, missed his grip. This time it takes him to the darkness. This time it was Richie who got the spider and bit his tongue with his mind since Bill missed the first try. Richie was trying to save Bill. He saw that the light was a light from the deadlight, and he finally gets a hold of Bill's hand. They do see the turtle, but then the turtle disappears right away. Richie was slipping and losing his tongue. Eddie realizes that why are they just standing there and doing nothing? So Eddie decides to spray it with his aspirator, and he realizes that his good arm slips into its mouth, and it ripped his arm off from his shoulder. Spoiler alert! And this part hurt me so bad, I actually cried during this part. Eddie dies! His last words to Richie were, "Don't call me Eds." And that's when he stops breathing and dies. While Beverly stays behind Eddie's body, Bill and Richie go back and destroy it forever. Smell the Barrens. They thought it was the smell of the Barrens, but it's actually the smell of it, the stink of it. It hung all over Derry. People actually don't even smell it because they think it's the smell of the Barrens. And they finally fight the spider. Richie and Bill struck together with their right fist, which is their combined force, augmented by the force of the other, the force of memory and desire, force of love, and unforgotten childhood. Then Bill plunks his hands into it, ripping and tearing his locked chest. Its heart explodes in Bill's hands. Spider collapses on its side and heard the voice of the other, and then it was gone. At 10:02, Derry collapsed, and Bill, Richie, Beverly, and Ben were able to get out of the sewer alive. The sad part is they left Eddie's body behind. And the end. But I do really recommend you guys reading it. I know it's a very it is very long. But is it worth 1,157 pages? Damn, it is. Go read it now. Sponsor me, Stephen King. Sponsor me, Stephen King. I love you. This is the end. See you guys later. Thank you for watching. Goodbye. Thank you.